Okay.
Yeah, I am if you am.
Are you going to cover swarm control today?
Yeah. No, no, not really. No. It's that's not really for this, is it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
You ready? Okay. Right. Back now. We're nearly halfway through, so that's good news for you, isn't it? All of what I told you should end up with you getting a bit of a crop. This is looking down on top of a super with a couple of frames removed. So that's what you'll see. The cap frames here and underneath as well, and that's actually quite a good photograph. That's one of the frames, or another one probably removed. Now those combs, when they're sealed like that, the honey inside will keep for years and years and years, long time. But when we extract the honey, we need to remove the capping that's on the top, which is really just pure beeswax. So there's Daisy removing the cappings there. We need to put the combs in what we call a honey extractor, of which from the ordinary beekeeper's point of view, there are two real types. This one, which is called a radial extractor, where the frames are facing inwards. When it rotates, it extracts honey from both sides of the comb. This one is called a tangential extractor, which is probably more suitable for the ordinary beekeepers with only a few hives. And what you do is you put the combs in here, round there and round there, and then you've got to partly extract one side, turn the combs over, fully extract the other side, and then go back and finish off the first side. Simply because the way it works, it only extracts one side at a time. We then need to strain it, and we put it in a tank called a bottling tank. If you look at old books, they used to call these ripeners. They weren't ripeners at all. But because some of the honey may not be fully sealed, it might be a bit thinner, so a bit more water in than there should be. And what they used to do was strain it into a tall tank like this, and the thin honey would gradually get to the top. So you could just take off the thick honey at the bottom, and the thin honey, which is likely to ferment because of the high water content, would be could be used either quickly or perhaps used in the kitchen. So what is this? There's a little tap at the bottom there. And from there upwards, that's the straining part. So what you do is strain it into here. When you extract honey, you beat air into it. So you leave it in here in a warm place for 2 or 3 days. The air bubbles gradually rise to the top, so you end up with what's effectively scum at the top, but you know, it's not quite like that. And you bottle nice clear honey off at the bottom. So most beekeepers, if they're keeping the bees for extracted honey, will need one of these and an extractor. Although a lot of beekeeping associations do hire or loan them out. Now there's a tap at the bottom. How do we store honey? Well, from the ordinary beekeeper's point of view, it's really 2 ways. Either in buckets like this, which are, most of them carry 30 pounds. I've got it into a plastic bag liner because it makes it a lot easier and cleaner. They've got a lid on, so then you just store those in a cool place over the winter. And then what you've got to do at a later stage, when you want to bottle it, is just take it out of the buckets, warm it up slightly to make it liquid if it's gone granulated, and it also flows quicker. And then bottle it off, or bottle it straight away, which has happened there. Honey bottles you can buy from appliance dealers. So it all works quite well, and exactly the same as it has for 100 and some odd years. And then at the end of the day, if you want to sell it, you can put you can make your own labels up, as I have done there, or get labels printed. Or if you just want to give it away to friends or presents or whatever, you can probably make up a bit of a fun label or something like that. Of course, if you're doing that, you don't need to work to regulations. If you're selling honey, there are regulations which I won't discuss here because they do keep changing, but they're freely available online anyway. Now, to make more colonies, you may wonder where your initial colony comes from if you get it from somebody else. I'm suggesting that you keep at least 2. And the reasons for that are that if something goes wrong with one, you've got the other one to help in emergency. And things are getting more and more difficult with bees. One time a day, I knew a lot of beekeepers that just had one colony. They just kept them year after year after year after year, no problem. Now there's just so many things going wrong with bees that that our losses are a lot higher than they used to be. Perhaps if a colony goes queenless, which is quite common during the summer, you can use the other one to help put it right. So perhaps replace winter losses. Now, all we do really is just split existing colony or colonies in some way. I'm not going to go into any great depths here today, because it's not what the day is about. And then, of course, you need to provide a queen in some way. So making colony increase, you've got one colony up there, you want another one. So don't take too much notice of this small box, because the slide was taken from something else. We have small hives, about nominally half normal size, which we call nucleus hives. A nucleus is a small colony. So all we do is there's a colony, full colony. All we really do in simple terms is just take some of the bees and the combs, put in the new box. We then need to give it a queen or a queen cell, which if you've only got one colony, depending on the state of it, you might have one or both of those available from the other colony, or perhaps get these from a local beekeeper. Please don't go, well, you won't buy queen cells, but please don't go buying queens. I'll explain that a bit later. So here's a nucleus. And that is a typical sort of increase that a normal beekeeper will make. You can see it's got a lot of bees in there, so it's well stocked with bees. It's also got the queen in a cage there. So the queen presumably didn't come from that nucleus. I can't remember now. Probably photographs were taken any time in the last 15 years or so. That's what you end up with. Now, this looks like being quite a strong nucleus, so it won't stay long in that box. If you can get a nucleus box early on, it's a really good asset to beekeeping. But of course, no good unless you actually start in the first place. Now, are you ready? Well, that's really only you who can answer that at the end of the day. But it helps if you're practical, as I've mentioned. You need to be able to make and repair a kit. Perhaps you need to be fairly well organised as well. You need to be physically fit because there's a little bit of bending, stretching, lifting, those sort of things to do. We at Whisper Green, we have had the occasional person come along who's had difficulty. We usually try to deal with them in some way, perhaps by helping other beekeepers if they can't do it themselves. I mean, one poor lady, she couldn't even operate a smoker, and she was so keen on starting beekeeping, and we tried to get the rest of her family. She had, I think, 4 children. Um, we tried to get her family involved, and they just did not want to know. So we try and help people if we can. You clearly need to be responsible, because if you sort of disrespect your neighbours and your bees, then you're hopefully going to get all the problems that you deserve. You need to be observant, because very often you see something and you think, hang on, I didn't see that last time. What's happened? It might just be something perfectly innocent, no trouble at all, or it could be something that unfortunately could mean that your bees have got to get burnt. Unlikely to happen, but that the possibility is there. You need to be quite logical as well. And as I've mentioned, I think a couple of times, you need to be a lateral thinker, because you need to be able to look at a hive and say, yeah, in 2 days' time, they're going to need so-and-so doing to them. And not frighten the bees as well, which is something else I've mentioned a couple of times. Sorry, if you're really frightened of getting stung, then you've got to ask yourself if you think beekeeping is for you. Bees and beekeeping really can do without the box tickers. You know, the people who've climbed a mountain or gone down a pothole, or gone windsurfing or hang gliding or beekeeping. Really, beekeeping isn't that sort of activity. And also the I want it now mentality. I must have my bees on. You need to be able to be a little bit patient and wait for things, because if you try to rush into it, the chances are you will fail. So how do you start then? Well, please don't do it unless you're absolutely sure. Contact your favoured beekeeping association. Try to handle bees on several times on your own if you can. And I mean actually right from the very start of opening the hive up to closing it down. Not going to a beekeeping association where there's 20 of you around a hive with one demonstrator. The demonstrator is the one that handles the bees and might occasionally shake some bees off a frame and handle a frame around the people. That is not teaching anybody how to keep bees. And I hope I get shot for this, because I'm absolutely serious. I think you need, not deliberately, but if you get yourself stung several times, just to make sure that you're comfortable at being stung, and also that you're not going to fall over and not get up again, because you really need to make sure that you're going to be okay. So how do you start then? Well, if you've been along to a local association, you've probably got a tutor or a demonstrator. Ask them if they think you're ready. If they're honest, that's the best course of action. Sometimes people do get pushed into beekeeping when they're not really ready or prepared. So have a chat with your demonstrator, have a talk with them. Don't, not just go, oh, you think already? Yeah, okay, or no, or not. Have a word with them. Find an apiary site, which may not be your home. It could be somewhere else. Up until now, you might just have thought, yeah, I'll go and see how I'll get on. Please discuss it with your family and neighbours if you haven't already done so, because I've come across ever so many who have been really keen and then you hear nothing of them. Phone them up and say, you know, are you coming to the meetings? Oh, what's gone wrong? Oh, my wife, stroke husband, or whatever partner has turned it down flat. Well, did you speak to them first? Well, no, I didn't. Have a chat with them, because it's not like taking up painting or drawing or poetry or something like that. This is something that some people are quite easy with, yet others can be quite frightened, and especially your neighbours both sides, because sooner or later your swarm's going to end up in our apple trees. It doesn't matter what you do, that's what's going to happen. So can you actually make the commitment? I've told you a little bit about the time involved, regular inspections. Okay, it's not taking out much of the day, but it is a commitment. Sometimes in beekeeping, if you leave something to tomorrow, it's a day too late. Right, now you can start, and I'm telling you, you can start. So you've got you've got authority there. So your local beekeeping association, I do know a lot of beekeeping associations. I know a lot of good ones, and I know some who perhaps could improve a bit, but they should give you all the help you need. If they don't, then you've got to perhaps question whether you're going to the right beekeeping association or not. Some of them may what we term mentor or buddy. We stopped doing that at Whisper Green 30 odd years ago. And the reason we stopped doing it is because what we found was the better beekeepers came to meetings. They worked out what needed to be done, and they were actually quite good at doing things themselves. What we found was that those that weren't very good always asked for a mentor to be there, so they wouldn't open their own hives unless a mentor was there, and the mentor was effectively managing the bees for them, which we thought was an abuse. So we stopped it. So please don't buy anything until speaking to them. That's bees and equipment, because there really are some tripwires. I've warned you about a few of them, but there's quite a lot there, and there's many more ways than one of getting stung in beekeeping, I'm afraid. So beekeeping associations, please remember that they're volunteers. They're not paid officials. They're not interviewed for their position. It's just the best people who's available there at the time. They do vary a lot, and I've tried to be clear on that. Some are very, very good. Others have got room for improvement. Now, if you latch on to local beekeeper at the local association, you can't tell the ability or knowledge of beekeepers by perhaps how long they've kept bees, because as the saying goes, somebody who's been keeping bees 40 years may well have made the same mistake 39 times. I've known some very, very good beekeepers, only been keeping bees a couple of years, yet some poor ones have been keeping 20, 30, 40 years or whatever. So that's not just, that's not just me saying that. You can't say much about the number of colonies either, because again, I've come across some very good beekeepers with 3, 4, 5 colonies, and some awful ones who kept 50 or 100. And you very definitely can't judge a beekeeper because of what qualifications they may have. There are good and bad beekeepers with and without qualifications. And you definitely can't tell how good they are by how noisy they are, because very often you get the 20 minutes experts who want to tell the world about what they just read. Right, now the easy bit, folks. How do you get your bits and pieces? Well, you can acquire a complete unit that is hive bees and whatever, or perhaps individual items. It depends what you've got locally, what help you've got, perhaps bits and pieces people give you, it really is going to be an individual thing. So getting local support, I think, is incredibly important. And beekeeping is one of those things where, in general, there's a lot of sort of self-help within it. Whatever, please seek sound advice rather than just listening to some a clown and charging off and doing something that you'll regret and may even lose your bees. So please be patient. There are beginners kits out there. I've seen some awful ones, not very many good ones. I would avoid those. It might appear the obvious thing to do. Oh yeah, I've got to get a beginner's kit. It's got everything I need. It might have a load of stuff that you don't actually want. I know there's been some available online, and I've seen some of them at the end of the day. One poor chap ended up with a hive that was made out of secondhand plywood, and that is not the way to do business. I think you probably can't change anything, and it may well be poor quality goods because if it's slapped together by somebody who isn't really a beekeeping organisation, they might get some cheap alternatives from here, there, and everywhere. You might get a smoker, let's say, that's a really cheap one. It looks very much like a more expensive but higher quality jobby. You can't really make any comparison between buying decent kit and a cheap alternative that you might get in a beginner's kit. And there may be something you either don't want or don't need. It may well be that there's a book, they include a book that you've already got or somebody advises you against. Things like bee brushes, which experienced beekeepers don't use. It could be that they give you the sort of frames that you have decided you don't want. It may be that you end up with self-spacing frames, the Hoffman ones I described earlier today, and you want another kind, or perhaps they give you a plastic excluder and you want a metal one. There's all sorts of things like that. These most parts are what we would term flat pack. So there you've got one brood chamber, 1, 2, 3 supers, a crown board that goes over the top of the boxes, and you've got a roof in amongst that lot. Now you can buy all of those individually. These are incidentally all seconds, and I can tell that because of the knot holes. If they're premium grade, you don't get knot holes in them. So I mentioned seconds earlier. I'm going to mention again, tell you a little bit more about them. There's one there. Now, it doesn't worry you too much at the moment, but there will be a nail put through each of these that way, and a row of nails down there, and a row of nails down there when that is made up into a box. So me as an experienced beekeeper, I know when I buy these that not to buy them with, let's say that knot was over here. But what you can do, of course, is drill a hole so that you don't have the problem when you're putting your nails in, or put a nail in a different place. So it's not quite the disaster that that it could be. Now, these seconds, they've really only been available for the last 20, perhaps 25 years. Now, they're made out of cedar. They're less than half price, as I indicated earlier. I understand they're made on the same machinery, so all sizes should be the same. Now, the good thing about it is, instead of it being probably Canadian Western red cedar, that's the same wood, same species, but they're actually British grown in regenerated forests. So they're not cutting down mature forests just to make us beehives. There are a few knots in them. I don't have a problem with that because that board ain't going to split like one would if it had no knots in. They are long lasting. There's a website for structural timbers, and they reckon that this material in the open has got a life of in excess of 60 years. Well, it's going to outlast most beekeepers. And if you look after it, it'll probably last a longer than that. So long lasting. I think these are incredibly good value. So they're not available all the time. They tend to do sales. So, but local associations might have a little stock of those. Some of them do. It's probably better if you make up your hive under instruction, because if you go wrong, it can be quite difficult to take it a bit, and it's easy enough to go wrong. I suggest strongly that you don't glue. There's no need to. One of the reasons is if you do go wrong, if you glue it, it's going to be difficult to take the bits. But also, a beehive out in the open is moving around all the time. It's sort of no, it's not alive, but you know what I mean. It's in the wet, it's in the dry, it's in the sun, all sorts of things like that. So it's moving around all the time. Now, if it does move a bit, the pressure's being put on the nails. If you glue it, the pressure's being put on the joint. But even after instruction, sometimes mistakes can get made. Right. Some beekeeping associations might have a scheme or a package for beginners. At Whisper Green, we've got a package which includes the bees and various options for a hive if you want it. Go along and have a chat with them. Find out what they do. They won't all be the same. Nobody does the same as us, and they can vary in content. Some might just give you the bees. Some might give you a hive. Might be new second. I know one organisation that takes in second-hand hives and cleans them up, but you know it's different. So check locally, because you just don't know what there is available. Anything through a local beekeeping association should be a good option, because of course they're beekeepers. It's not just a case of buying something on the internet slapped together by somebody who wants to make a bit of money out of selling things they don't know much about. But get help and support. Don't just go charging into it, because it is not an easy thing to do. So the cost, well, it could be nothing or fairly minimal. I've got three options here. You could be lucky enough to be given the items, and I've come across ever so many beekeepers who've been lucky enough that somebody who's packing up has been kind enough to just hand over everything to a beginner. So that will be a nice way if you can find somebody like that. Perhaps you're given a hive. If you are given a hive and somebody coming up with a present or something like that, please make sure they don't just go and buy any old hive, or read a few websites and decide what you're going to have. If you know it's coming, try and put them off, and then tell them what to get after speaking to somebody. If you make your own, as I think somebody hinted earlier, you really must make sure the sizes are, well, say spot on. They need to be really accurate. Otherwise, you could end up with problems. A lot of people have charged off and made beehives, try to get bees in them, and then realise there's a problem. Frames and foundation are difficult to make. You can make frames, yeah. Foundation, you don't need a lot, but let's allow £30 for that. If you get a swarm from a local association or somebody you know, they're usually free, so there's no cost there. And most beekeeping associations have got some form of library where they lend books out to members, and many of them have got extracting equipment, and they're going to be the sort of expensive bits. So really, you can start beekeeping if you're really lucky for not very much at all. If you want to lay it a bit more, a couple of £300, perhaps a hive tool might be a tenner. In the sales, you might be able to get one at a fiver. Smoker, £35 for a decent one, £15 for a cheap one. But the smoker that I showed you earlier was one of half a dozen that we brought for Whisper Green 15 years ago, I should think. And they were expensive ones, and they're still going strong. Yet we bought some of the cheaper ones, cheaper copies at 15 quid, and they lasted 2 years before they burnt out. So I would go for the better one, but you can usually tell by the quality of it. Tunic, perhaps £35 or veil for 20. Gloves, perhaps a tenner. Seconds or a second-hand hive. And I'll put them in at roughly the same price because being involved with the auction for so many years, very often people pay more for second-hand hives than they will for a second new one. Frames and foundation again, £30. Swarm free one. I will ring swarm there because it may not be instant. We had people at Whisper Green last year who asked for swarm early on and didn't get one because there just weren't many around. Yet another year there might be a huge amount. And then, of course, the Beekeeping Association loans again. So it needn't cost you a fortune for beekeeping unless you want to. Now, you can easily spend £2,000 plus by having top of the range everything. New hive, perhaps, WBC, like I told you earlier, £385, £400. If you get all bright, gleaming, extracting equipment, it costs you £1,000. You can spend a lot more if you want to, but anybody who's going to spend that money isn't going to worry too much about it anyway. Now, there are going to be a few other costs. So feeding. But if you leave a super of honey, as some people do, of course, that's not a cost, but you haven't got the 20 or 30 pound of honey that was in the super. There may be some medication, things like Varroa treatment, if you want to. We're talking about probably a tenner a colony a year. The second hive that I've persuaded you to get, or I hope I've persuaded you to get, but that's okay if you stay there. But some people want more hives and some people want even more hives. That's beyond the scope of the day. That is called bee fever. Try to avoid that if you possibly can, but it's something which comes with enthusiasm, or what might be termed over enthusiasm. Now, it could be recouped by honey sales. You don't have to have any outlets or anything like that. Perhaps selling a garden gate or to friends, family, workmates, that sort of thing. If you do, then you have got regulations to abide by. But remember, it's a hobby, so expect it to be a cost, as most hobbies are. Somebody said to me on one occasion that they went walking, don't cost them anything. I said, have you got any walking boots? Oh, yeah. How much did you pay for them? Well, £80. There's a cost to it. So the map, all sorts of things like the waterproofs, rucksack sandwiches. Sourcing bees and queens, fairly useful if you want to start beekeeping. Please, please, please resist buying imported ones. We're having problems at the moment, as no doubt you've probably seen in the press. Imported bees and queens have been a problem for over 100 years, and there's still a problem. And I don't want to batter on too much about it, but a lot of the problems we've got currently are caused because people have imported bees and other bits and pieces with them, like disease and pests and that sort of thing. I've been told that all 5 national beekeeping associations have a policy of non-importation. That's British Beekeepers, which really covers England, Wales, Scotland, Ulster, and Ireland. That's what I've been told by trustees. There are pest diseases and pathogens which are waiting to get at us, which really will only come in on bees. There's been quite a bit of work done recently with a scientific paper published last year, 2020, where recently imported bees and queens have got a higher level of disease than those that were here in the first place. The pests I mentioned, that are 2 notifiable pests. Both of them will kill colonies quite quickly. One of them I've seen in the States, and I wouldn't want them to come in. So we must be very, very careful what we're importing. They may also be unsuited to our climate because most of the imports are not the native subspecies or crosses or whatever. They're ones that evolved a lot further south than us. So they're not used to our long damp winters. They're usually very prolific because that suits that. When I say prolific, the queens lay a lot of eggs, and that is because where they come from, the weather's usually good, so they can support the forage and can support the much bigger colonies. Of course, they come here and they starve out because they're too big. They do need a lot of food, and very often people are feeding their bees in the summer when they shouldn't have to, or starvation's a problem. Some of them, especially type called Carniolan, they are very swarmy, and they're known to be swarmy. Everyone knows they're swarmy, apart from people who use them. Now, there is a possible bad temper. It's called F2 aggression in beekeeping terms, and it's where you get a pure race, a pure queen. Her daughter is usually good. It's her granddaughter that you get. There's a chance. I'm told it's a 1 in 4 chance of getting aggression in the second generation. I'm not a geneticist, and I don't know why that is, but long-term beekeepers know that is a problem. Now, most of the queens that come in are either pure races or first crosses, so that's why we don't like it. If you do have to buy queens, please use only UK reared ones. Don't have something that comes in from outside, because of course you've got the same problem. There is a chance of buying on the internet. You can get queens from all over the place, but there is a protocol for importation. So if you import them, there are things that you've got to do with the bee inspectors, which you can see on their website. I'm not going to bother to tell you all about that. Please, please, please don't smuggle. So if you go on holiday to Tuscany or somewhere like that, and somebody says, "Oh, you're a beekeeper, take this home and try this," please don't smuggle. You can raise your own queens. I raised about 150 last year. It really is very, very simple. All you need is one colony, which hopefully you've got anyway. So raise them from your own bees. You ought to have help from your local beekeeping association or perhaps other beekeepers just to get you started. And then, of course, in a few years' time, you're helping somebody else. You folks will probably enjoy that. So importation then, suppliers may not always make it obvious. They'll sell a queen, but they won't say where it's come from. Ask them, you've got a right to know. And if it has come in from abroad, then I suggest strongly you tell them that that's where it should stay. On the BIBBA website, I'll come back to BIBBA now. There, if you just look on the front page, there's a little box that leads you to 15 reasons not to use imports. Please check it out and take notice of it. There are some who will try to persuade you otherwise, but I won't say anything about anyone, but they're usually trying to persuade you for a reason. Now, there is a perceived shortage of bees, which is daft really, because in England and Wales alone, there are 250,000 colonies of bees. And in the right conditions, you can multiply a colony of bees tenfold each year. So the perceived shortage is a dream, really. Please be patient. Join your local beekeeping association. Try to help with demonstrations as much as you can. Work with other beekeepers, perhaps your own village or whatever, and gain experience before buying. So where to get bees without combs? Well, the obvious one is a swarm, which I have mentioned in a couple of the options. They're often in a rush because they roar out the front of a hive, they cluster in somebody's garden. They don't want them, or the children don't want them, or the granny don't want them, or the granddad or whatever. So it's, oh, you come around and get them sharpish. So somebody's got to move quite quickly. They do need a bit of preparation. You obviously need to get your hive ready and get with your kit and all sorts of things like that. On the other hand, though, there may well be a little bit of a wait. You'll probably need help, but most beekeeping associations have got a swarm collectors list. And even though you might not be allowed to go on that because of inexperience, if there's somebody fairly close to you, tell them that you'd like a swarm. Can I come and help you collect one if you next time you get one? And you know, beekeeping works really well like that. The great thing is they're free, unless you want to give somebody something for having them, but it's cost them nothing. And you know, I never give them anything for a swarm. Now, they are frowned upon by some people, only a small minority who claim that they're always bad-tempered or they're diseased or whatever. They don't forget they've come out of a colony somewhere. So if they come out of a colony, why should the swarm be any more diseased or worse tempered than the colony? Personally, I think it's a brilliant way for a beginner to start, because they can go out and they can collect the swarm. They can help the person that does it, take it home, put it in their own hive, see it start up, see it develop, and then hopefully at the end of the day, get some honey out of it. So it's a brilliant way, I think, for a beginner to start, rather than just having a box of bees delivered by the courier. So where to get bees with combs? Well, there's option of a full colony, whole colony, which might be perhaps somebody giving up or reducing. Most years there are some available, certainly the West Sussex auction. There are probably half a dozen or other auctions throughout the country. Clearly not going to be this year. Nucleus was a small colony. There's a useful leaflet with a suggested nuclear standard that the British Beekeepers Association have got. Leaflet L014. I know it's good because I wrote it. So if you're buying one commercially, ask them if they comply with that standard. If somebody's doing you a favour, then clearly they're doing you a favour, and you don't have to do that. So I think probably from a local beekeeper is a better option than buying a commercial. There are dangers with commercial. There are some good suppliers, but I know there are some who are. I wouldn't buy anything from them. Let's put it that way. It can probably be made up from several colonies, which doesn't really matter to a beekeeper. But from a beginner, the balance of the little nucleus needs to be right between the brood, the food, and the bees as well. You need roughly the right number of foraging bees to nurse bees or house bees or whatever, and that sort of thing. With commercial, of course, they may be imported. And I heard of one certainly last year who was making them up and putting in imported queens with them and telling people they were locally bred and they weren't. But I'm not even going to say which part of the country it was. But you hear these things in beekeeping. Now, I have seen both good and poor bees sold by commercial organisations. You think, oh well, they're selling bees for a living. Yes, they are, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to sell good ones for a living. Now, you can't handle before purchase, but if you went to somebody in your local association who is going to let you have a nucleus, the chances are they'll say, well, come along and you have a look at the bees first, make sure you're happy with them. And of course, for the commercial one, you won't get any further help. That's it, sorry, we got your money, go away unless you want another one. As usual, seek sound advice. Check with somebody locally where the good places are to get bees. This is what you should get. Something, a little nucleus, there's 5 frames there, should be absolutely bursting with bees. Combs should be well covered like that. If you've only got half the number of bees on the combs and that, you really ought to be going back and saying, oi, we're a bit short of bees here. Be careful. I'm going to make a few repeats. Advise against buying on the internet because it really is a lottery, and beware of beginners packages. The suppliers, they do vary considerably. We got some good ones. We got some really good ones that have been going for yonks, and we always tend to get some that are starting up, and they never last very long. But unfortunately, they disappoint a lot of people when they're here. Now, beginners don't always know what they should be getting. So perhaps if you end up getting a nucleus and it's short of, let's say, bees, adult bees, you won't necessarily know. So that's why I said half a dozen times or more, seek local help. So if you avoid the pitfalls, beekeeping really can be fun. What now? Well, you can walk away. And I'll see from the participants at the bottom, 1 or 2 might have done. That's fine if we've helped somebody come to that conclusion without buying something, put it at the bottom of the garden, keep it 6 weeks, and then decide you don't like it. So somebody else has got the problem of disposing it. Then that's absolutely fine. We've helped you. Are you going to continue? If so, I suggest that you go and pick on a beekeeping association, go and join them, and do the same as most of the rest of us, which is enjoy the craft. So it just remains now for me to thank you all, the attendees, for sticking at it. BIBBA for hosting the event, of course, Whisper Green Association for putting it forward in the first place. Richard Senior, who's the chap in the background who's been doing all the recording, all the various things in the background. And just a closing statement, exactly the same as the opening statement. Beekeeping is fun. It really is, because I enjoy it. So it's got to be fun. So that's it. The dogs think beekeeping is fun too, and they want to know if they can help me answer your questions. So thank you all very much indeed.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Roger. Let's have a look.
Do you want me to stop sharing or not?
You can do, yeah. That'll make your face bigger for everybody at home. So they might not thank me for that. Am I right in thinking that only imported bees could develop F2 aggression, or can a local bees have the mutation?
It's unlikely. Most of the instances I've come across are because of some imports about recently imported stuff. Many of the colonies that I've removed from wild places, I've never come across, and I'm talking about several hundred, I have never come across any bad tempered ones, apart from last year. I think, hang on, wait just a minute. No, it must have been the year before because of COVID. I took 4 out of a barn, about 4 at the end of a barn, 4 colonies at the end of a barn. So it must have been May 2019. And one of those was a bit spiteful, but there was evidence that it only just gone in there. If it had stayed any length of time, I think the winter would have taken it out. They looked very yellowish, and they were not the sort of bees that I normally see when I remove wild colonies. So it's answering the question, but in a roundabout sort of way, because the imports don't, in my experience, don't live very long in the wild. They're fairly distinctive when you look at them. They're fairly distinctive, and those sort of bees, they just don't seem to live very long in the wild. So they haven't got the oomph or whatever, and you know, haven't got the characteristics to live. So it's a roundabout way of answering the question. I hope I have. The things that have been here any length of time aren't usually bad tempered. I know there's a view that with some people that they are, but I think it's just blind eye sort of thing.
Excellent. Loads of lovely comments coming in. As all beekeeping associations are closed due to COVID, would you say that it's not worth doing beekeeping until next year, when we can hopefully do a practical beekeeping course?
It depends. At Whisper Green, what we're trying to do is to do it by video, so that we can do a couple of videos every week and help people that way. It's not easy. I have seen some very good beekeepers that have started without the help of the Beekeeping Association. They just picked it up, and that's because of the type of people they are. But there are others who just made a complete and utter hash of it. It's down really to the individual. I've got to be absolutely honest. Yes, of course you can start without help from local beekeeping association, but I've really tried to generalize. Really, I would join them as much as anything. You cover with the insurance. If they're a BBKA or a Welsh or whatever, or a Scottish member, they should be covered by insurance. which is well worth having anyway. Have a chat with them and see how they're dealing with things. I know some are just closing their books, but most people are taking on, but saying, sorry, we can't teach it. But Whisper Green, we're hoping to teach by video if we can.
Excellent. A couple of people asking about bait hives. Should they leave a hive out in the apiary in the hopes that a swarm will arrive?
Right, there's a there's a bit of skill needed putting a bait hive out. You need old combs to start with, otherwise you won't get a colony in there. You need to make sure it's got a solid floor. If you use an open mesh floor, which is made out of wire mesh, I've never known a swarm go in a bait hive with a mesh floor. I think it's because the bees don't seem to think they can defend it. They don't seem to recognise that there's mesh that nothing else can get in. You need to make sure the entrance is quite small, because it seems, and I'm humanising bees now, and I said we shouldn't be doing that. It's almost as if they realise that the bigger entrances they can't defend. So it needs to be a small entrance, which I mentioned at one of our Whisper Green meetings a couple of nights ago. If you take a matchbox, only got anything that looks like a matchbox, take the edge of it. About that area wise is absolutely fine. Much bigger than that, and you may find that the swarm doesn't go in there. Have I said don't put it in the sun?
No, but you have now.
Oh, how do you know?
Because you just said.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, don't put it in the sun, because I have known on hot day, swarm go be put in and then abscond a couple of days later because I think of the heat. So yeah, I mean there are one or two other things, but perhaps I better not say them online. Yeah, I will. Yeah. Have a look on Dave Cushman's website at Bees and Energy Lines, and what I find is that bees will only go into a home that they select themselves if they've got at least 4 energy lines crossing, so a point where they cross. I know that's poo-pooed by a lot of people, but I'm pretty convinced that it does happen, and I'm saying that with a dead straight face. Go on, Gary.
How often do you renew queens, and do you take the old one out and put workers, allow the workers to raise a new one?
Right. Yeah. In this country, I don't believe there's any need to renew queens at all. Where it has come from is the countries where they use very prolific queens that produce massive colonies. The queens simply get worn out. Bees that do well in this country aren't those. There's just too many bees, and the ones that do, in my opinion, best in this country are the less prolific queens that lay less eggs, therefore they don't get worn out. So I just don't replace queens at all. Now the theory is that the pheromone, the queen substance that I told you about, pheromone, diminishes through the life of the queen, and the bees can detect that is diminishing, and up go the swarm cells and they decide to swarm. They probably do with the more prolific ones, but the less prolific ones, I don't think that's so much of an issue. And I've had ever so many queens, 4, 5, even 6 years old, and the colony is still productive throughout the life of the queen. I know it's in books, but I think it's taken from abroad. The answer is, if you use locally raised queens from local stock, you haven't got a problem.
Is there a way to estimate the number of bees in a hive?
Well, I expect the scientists have got one. Wonder why anyone would want to bother to do it anyway. There's no real need to. As a beekeeper, you don't need to know how many bees there are in a hive. Dave Cushman on his website has got a page on estimating bees. I've might have read it a time or two, but have a look on that. That'll probably give you as good as idea as anything. But don't forget that you've got some of them out in the field, so you don't know how many are out there. And you could have a hive with 2, 3, 4 supers on, and you just don't know. So if somebody wants to do it, then there is a formula, but I doubt if it's very accurate.
If you want to make an increase from 3 hives and want to go to 6, is there a particular way that you would suggest going about that?
Well, it's way beyond today. There's a lot of pages on Dave Cushman's website, and as I told you earlier, there's a draft copy of a new book out that will be out soon. Have a look on Dave Cushman's website. It would depend when you actually wanted to do it and why you wanted to do it. So it's actually a lecture in itself. So you can easily change. I have used a method for over 40 years now that can produce 10 times the number of colonies going into the next winter that came out of last winter, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm just because you did a talk of simple colony increase.
Yep.
So I'm just copying the
URL.
Yeah, to paste in for them. Any news on the Asian hornet in the UK?
Not to my knowledge. There wasn't very much this year. I think there were quite a lot of false alarms. I believe there was one down in Hampshire, down in the New Forest. But what happened with that, I don't know. I found it difficult this year to keep, well, last year, to keep tabs on everything.
Roger, are black bees more aggressive than other types?
No. This is one of the myths of beekeeping. Supporters of the lighter colour bees, the imports, yes, I'll blame black bees for everything. I've come across some bad-tempered black bees. I've come across some bad-tempered yellow bees. I really don't think it's as much in it. I think it's the crosses that cause the problems, not what your origin was.
Do aggressive bees
well, hang on, let's go back a bit. It depends why they're black. If they're a native bee, which is known as a British black bee, if I've known it to be pure, and I've handled a lot of colonies in a lot of different places, I have never, ever, ever come across a bad-tempered one. These people that keep peddling this stuff, they sort of cut and paste information from elsewhere. All the stories about chasing you up the garden path and all that old twaddle is really been dreamt up by mischief makers. You can get black bees that are fairly early crosses from any bees, really. They could be our native, or they could be what are called carniolans. Now, all pure races that I've handled, it doesn't matter what they are. I've never handled the Africanized ones, but that doesn't matter. Whether it's our own Apis mellifera and mellifera, Italians or carniolans, all pure ones that I've ever handled that I've known to be pure have always been calm and gentle. It's when you get the crosses that the problems occur, and the crosses are usually caused by the importations. Sorry, but that's the opinion.
How often do bees need feeding during winter?
Cool.
And do they need supplementary feeding in spring or summer?
I very, very rarely, and I've got about 25 colonies of my own. It depends on the year, but anything between 30 and 50 colonies overwintering at Whisper Green teaching apiary. So well over 50 colonies. I just don't feed supplementary over the winter. There's no need to, because there's kinds of bees that I keep. If you've got to feed bees during the winter, there's two things wrong. Either you didn't give them enough in the autumn, or they're prolific. The queens are laying when they shouldn't be laying. Brood is incredibly hungry, and the bees are just simply turning their food into brood that they don't need. They need the food, but they don't need the brood.
In winter, is early morning sun important for hive temperature?
Somebody asked that one.
Oh, have I asked that already?
Yeah, I thought somebody asked that.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Well, okay, then all right. While you're dithering. No, don't forget bees live in trees, and they don't actually get very much sun. They might need or might be helped with a little bit of warm, but that's not the same thing. If you get sort of wind chill or something like that, then that's that will obviously reduce the temperature inside the hive. I've kept bees. Well, I know somebody in Wales who keeps their bees in the valley that during the winter doesn't get any sun at all, and the bees do really well there. So no, it's no, putting bees in sun deliberately doesn't necessarily do them any good.
Right.
You still alive?
Yeah, I was talking to myself then because I didn't unmute. Sorry. Do aggressive bees or bees on the defense chase humans or attack in a group?
What do you mean? Well, they chase humans if the humans are running away. But yeah, you get what are called followers, and they're bees that get angry when they're inspected. You move away, and they keep following you. The majority of bees that do get a little bit angry at the hive, and it could be for any reason. It could be that they've been badly treated, or it could be because of their genetics. It's in the bees. Most of them, you walk away from the hive, and the bees stay with the hive. But then you get followers, and what a term followers, and you walk away and they're following you for 50 or 100 yards. I did a demonstration down in the West Country 4 or 5 years ago now, I suppose, and there were four ladies leapt a fence because the bees were so bad, and they were belting off across the paddock, being followed by bees. Now they were bad bees, really bad bees, but that's what I was supplied with, so that's all I could use. And they were very definitely followers, that lot were.
How is it decided if a larva becomes a drone or a worker?
Oh, right. Yep. The two female casts, the queen and the workers, they are the result of a fertilized egg. Drones are the result of an infertile egg. So, so drones will always come from an infertile egg. Well, say always. You can get diploid drones, but the bees remove the eggs apparently. But that's a scientific thing which I don't know very much about. But you can definitely get diploid drones.
How does the queen know to lay a drone egg in a drone cell? How does she know the difference between a worker and a drone?
Yeah, again, this is reading, and I'm not sure that it's always correct, but apparently she's supposed to measure the cell with her antenna. Whether that's actually right or not, I don't know. Others say that when she's backing into the cell, because the worker cell is smaller, she's got the cell touching her on all sides, and that triggers it off. I really don't know. I would be guessing.
Okay. Are bees territorial about where they forage? So if your neighbor has bees, are they likely to be fighting if they are?
Ah, right. Okay. Yes. No. Not at all.
Okay. How much honey can an average sized hive eat in one day compared to how much they actually make? So,
well, you say average, it depends where it is, and what sort of bees. If you've got these prolific bees, they can get through a lot more honey. And if you look in Beowulf Cooper's book, Honeybees of the British Isles, he there states that Italian bees need 2.5 times the amount of food for maintenance than our native bees do. So you've got 2.5 times difference there. I really don't know. I haven't got a clue. But I don't think it. There's so many variations. I really don't think it's worth even guessing.
okay. And the final question: in our unpredictable British weather, is there a negative effect for checking your hive in the rain?
Negative effect to inspecting a hive?
Yeah, in the rain.
Oh, I've done it on many occasions. If it's absolutely hammering down with rain, then it won't do the bees any good. But light drizzle, I've handled colonies ever so many times. But of course, if you're, it depends how long you're going to be. If you're going to do a 5 or 10 minute inspection, then it's probably no harm. But if you're going to spend half hour over it and they get sopping wet, then it won't do them any good. There's lots of things you can do. Golf umbrella is quite handy, but you probably need 2 of you to operate it. Or perhaps put a gazebo over the hive or something like that. I think usually most summers you can handle a colony most days. It doesn't always rain all day, does it? Well,
No.
not in my part of the world.
More likely to rain all day up here in Yorkshire. Excellent. Thank you ever so much, Roger. Just to remind people that there is a wealth of information and Roger's information on the BIBBA YouTube channel, because he's done an awful lot of education over the last year for us. So please go to the BIBBA website and click on on the menu at the top, webinars, there's watch the recordings. There's a whole raft of webinars that will be useful for you.
Well, quite frankly, some of the questions that were asked really were answered more in the webinars. And if they were that far advanced in their beekeeping, they really ought to look at the that webinar stream, because there's still lots of questions, lots of webinars and topics to come.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much, Roger.
Okay. And goodbye, everybody. And we'll see you in an hour or so, Richard.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, because we got another one. Oh, hang on, there's some more coming in.
Oh, it's just messages of thanks.
All right. Okay. All right. Yep. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Cheerio.
All right.
Cheerio,
Bye now.
folks.